So before we go into that, we need to talk about what is a bubble.
Yeah.
So I'll let you give your definition of a bubble. I have the formal definition.
Ooh, okay.
It's a quiz. There's no wrong answers, but there is one.
The definition of a bubble is, I would say, a continued reliance on the greater fool principle, which is that something has its value only reliant on the fact that there will be a greater fool than you to whom you can sell that to at a slightly higher price. That there's no underlying intangible value to support that. You are inherently reliant on someone else just being willing to pay more than you, so it's a hot potato. But the idea being, at some point, someone's going to be left, holding the bag, if you will.
Like the Toronto housing market.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been, I don't know, there's been many examples of it in different market sectors. But how does that compare with the?
That is very close.
Webster's defines it.
Webster defines it as basically, the rapid escalation of prices to the point where it outvalues its actual intrinsic value.
Yeah.
So if on an asset-based value, it's truly, if you boil it all down, worth $100,000. People are now trading at 150. The greater fool is going to pay 180 now. It's still only worth 100 or 110. You're now in what's considered a bubble.
Yeah, and maybe that person who bought it for 180 can find someone that would pay them 185, and maybe that person who got it for 185 might be able to find some for 190. But at some point, there's going to be a threshold there where it hits that, and people all realize at once en masse, oh my gosh, this was only worth $110,000 to begin with, and that is the burst, if you will.
Yeah. I think typically to get to that burst, it requires the availability of something at that lower value.
Yeah, there has to be.
Because if there is no option still, it's going to continue to go. But if there's someone that slides in, says, hey, I can get you that for 110 now, why the hell would I go pay 190?
Yeah, and this is sort of, how do you reconcile this idea of something being a quote-unquote bubble with the idea that I know you and I both subscribe to pretty strongly of supply and demand, right? Like, ultimately, the market decides, and someone being willing to pay for something is, one could argue, the value of that. And just because that changes quickly doesn't mean something was wrong or right before.
Overvalued or undervalued.
I mean, that is the general principle of supply and demand.
Yep.
However, market value requires a few different things to be a true measure of market value. So, I mean, we can dive into that with a bit more scrutiny. But what are you seeing out there, and what are you hearing out there from people?
I think it's getting to the point now, locally within Halifax, there's some sentiment that it is a bit of a bubble. And I think it's really come to light because this summer there's been a little bit of a slowdown.
Yep.
I'm not going to call it a pullback because I really don't think it's been a pullback.
No.
But there's been a bit of a slowdown. So instead of having 15 offers like we were having in the spring, you're having 5 to 7.
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone's like, oh, like here it comes. We're in a bubble. Like it's pulling back. And I'm getting a lot of people text me like, hey, I'm seeing price changes on MLS. Like, what's going on? Like, should I be waiting? And I'm usually saying, no, you know what? Like, they overpriced their house, assuming that they could catch wind of something. Like, yeah, their neighbor listed for $300, sold for $400. So now they think, I'm going to list for $400.
And then still they want $100,000 over. They're double counting. A lot of sellers are double counting. They're saying, okay, cool. The house was on for $300. It sold for $400, and so great. I want a $400,000 ask price, but also I see houses are selling for $100,000 over. So why can't I get 5? It's like, no, you cannot have both. You can have one or the other.
Yeah.
So there's an element of that where sellers are now getting, I don't want to say the word greedy, right? But that's what buyers say. Oh, they're getting greedy. But no, they're trying to navigate this market that changed very quickly, and they're trying to capitalize on it because that's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
But some of them are in moments choosing the wrong approach.
Yep.
And then what happens is the market starts to slow a little bit, and they're like, okay, well, maybe I was going to take the 300,000, list low and hope to sell for 4 approach.
Yep.
But now people keep telling me the market's slowing. So maybe I need to list at, 290 to cover my bets a little bit, right? And then people see it at 290, and the buyers go, oh, well, gosh, like they probably want like $50,000 over because everyone's getting $50,000 over. And I don't want to pay $340 for this. So then the home sits.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so this is the cat and mouse game that is at work right now, and that always kind of goes on. It's just the pendulum shifts a little bit from side to side.